Hello, my name is Sarah Walcott. I'm the collections manager here at the International Quilt Museum. Today I will be showing you some quilts from our flat storage in our collections storage. Our flat storage units allow us to store textiles in the most protective way possible. They never have to be refolded, they aren't rolled, so they don't have to be handled, and they're also protected from light inside these units. Our storage area is climate controlled, kept at between 45 and 55% relative humidity year-round and a constant temperature of 68 degrees. So this piece that we're looking at right here, it dates to about 1830. It is a French whitework, all done by hand. This would have likely been a commission for a wedding. It has these intertwined initials in the center, a J and an R, and then lots of fertility symbols around the outside, different pomegranates, figs, flowers, and also there are a couple of birds here toward the bottom. Each of the flowers on this quilt represents different types of love, which would have been apparent to contemporary viewers of the quilt. So these quilts would not have been made by the person who was going to use them. They would have been created in an atelier, a workshop staffed by young women who did this as a profession. Very long hours, very, very difficult work. As you can imagine, getting all of these tiny little stitches and stuffing and cording a quilt like this, and then the entire thing is finished in a buttonhole stitch, which it represents even more of this meticulous handwork. This quilt from the original James collection was created by Ida Stowe in 1933. And she made this quilt for the competition sponsored by Sears and Roebuck for the 1933 World's Fair in Chicago. So Sears and Roebuck publicized this competition. It had large cash prizes and a very short timetable, just a few months, that women were attempting to get these quilts made to represent Chicago and represent the World's Fair. So this one has a really kind of almost contemporary look from a little ways away, but when you get closer you can see everything she's quilted in her quilting stitches, all these great details, the skyline of Chicago along with log cabins and teepees and other historical elements. And over in the corner you can actually see the tag, the entry tag for the Chicago World's Fair competition that Ida created to enter her quilt in the fair.
Hi, my name is Jamie Swartz. I'm collections assistant here at International Quilt Museum. Show you some quilts in our flat storage units. These are quilts that can't be folded or rolled for various reasons. The first one I will pull out here is by the artist Faith Ringgold. It's one of two Faith Ringgold quilts that the museum is lucky enough to possess. It is titled Men, the Mask Face Quilt number 2. It was made by Faith in 1986, so pretty early in her quilting career. She's since made a number of other story quilts and other portrait quilts featuring famous people. There are no famous people on this quilt. It's just everyday people in different costumes per se, or masks. And this is the companion piece to the men, titled The Women. Faith Ringgold actually holds the record for the most money paid at auction for a quilt. Not these in particular. It was a portrait quilt of Maya Angelou that was commissioned by Oprah, which the Crystal Bridges Museum in Arkansas purchased. The Reconciliation quilt was the former record holder, which now resides in our collection.
This 19th century wool soldier's quilt was likely created by Jewett Curtis, an American soldier. Most of the soldiers' quilts that we know about were created in the UK or India by British soldiers and possibly Indian tailors as well. So all of these pieces in the quilt are made of wool, felted wool, so it really doesn't ravel. So they're able to be stitched together with almost no seam allowance at all to create these beautiful mosaic designs. So this piece has been backed in silk, and so it is deteriorating badly, unfortunately. We see that in a lot of 19th century silks. One reason for that is the iron mordants that were added, or the different types of metallic mordants that were added to the dyes to make the fabric heavier as it was sold by the pound at the time. However, that is now resulting in what's known as shattering, which is, as you can see, where that silk just starts to disintegrate. And that is what's known as an inherent vice in a textile, something that happens at the production level that will eventually lead to the demise of the fabric itself. So this is another piece from the original James collection, and this is actually a coffin cover, but it has so much in common with Crazy Quilts that it is a part of our collection, and in the sense that it is a layered textile held together by stitches, it is still a quilt. So this is from the same era as a Crazy Quilt, late 19th century, during this Victorian era where there were significantly different mourning traditions than there are today. And so in this case, this quilt would have been laid over the top of someone's coffin so that they could just kind of as a decorative remembrance. It's also likely that this would have been used for more than one person in the same family. And you can see in this quilt as well a lot more of that shattering. Black fabrics are especially prone to it, and black silks are very, very often we see them in this condition. So this has had some conservation work done to it. So you can see the netting that's been added, silk crepeline netting, to kind of stabilize that shattering fabric and keep it from getting worse and keep any of those pieces from coming off. So we don't repair because that destroys the integrity of the original piece, but we do conserve and try to keep the piece around as long as we can.
Here's probably one of the most famous Crazy Quilts, or most published Crazy Quilts, and it's titled My Crazy Dream. It was made by Mary Hernandez Ricard, who signed, dated, and titled this quilt, and included a portrait of herself on the quilt. And if you wish to view this quilt in full detail, you can go to Google Arts and Culture, where there's a high-res image that allows you to zoom in on all the different parts. You could probably spend hours looking at the variety of needlework and fabrics present in the quilt.
This 1860s quilt is one of only a handful of extant examples of quilts that have the Sanitary Commission stamp on them. The Sanitary Commission was created during the Civil War. Thousands of these quilts were created, and only a few remain. So as you can see, this is a signature quilt with inked signatures in each of the blocks, or most of the blocks, letting the recipient know exactly who worked on this quilt. This quilt has been pieced in a potholder style, which means that each block is bound and then attached to its neighboring blocks, rather than a binding encompassing the outside edges of the quilt like we normally see. So this quilt from the Jonathan Holstein collection is made using a number of cigar ribbons, which were kind of promotional ribbons that came in packages or boxes of cigars. So occasionally we see quilts that use cigar ribbons. We also have a jacket in our collection made using cigar ribbons, and so it has a similar look to a traditional string quilt pattern, but as you can see, it made all of those cigar ribbons, and it has sort of a similar look to selvage quilts that some makers are creating today. Once again, you can see that black silk that was very popular in this era, the late 19th century, heavily deteriorating and coming apart along the yarns. So this quilt was likely created in honor of Queen Victoria's Jubilee. She is there in the center, and then there are several other members of the royal family depicted in these lithographs above and below her. So as you can see all over the quilt, the maker has fussy cut ribbons along their stripes to create these kind of cobweb-like patterns inside the blocks, and used a huge variety of silk satins, silk velvets, and silk jacquards to create this quilt. The ribbon in the diamond shape around the image of Victoria is a commemorative Jubilee ribbon, and then there are also dozens of other ribbons around the edge of the quilt which were collectibles, and most of them refer to birthdays, also Little Red Riding Hood, Get Well Soon, things like that, and a few political and other motifs. Thank you for joining us behind the scenes at the International Quilt Museum. And
Happy National Quilting Day.